Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Adam, tell me your strategy for buying rentals.
So my strategy has always been buying rental properties that have some kind of value add component. So I would either be making repairs, adding a bedroom, finishing a basement, something that's not turnkey.
And how many of these have you done?
I've done roughly 65 or 70 of them since 2013, so roughly over a 9-year period.
The interest rates are a lot higher today than they were when you got started, and I've heard from several people that said that the BRRRR strategy just can't be done anymore, that it was a good strategy in the past, but it doesn't work today. What would you say to someone that thinks that?
I would say pretty much every real estate investment strategy is centered around the deal. Deals are definitely harder to come by, especially with the higher rates, but it doesn't mean they're impossible. So I think the strategy can still work. You just maybe have to lower your expectations a bit.
I think Adam's right. The BRRRR strategy is a timeless rental property investing strategy that really works in any market. And on the podcast today, we're going to figure out how Adam built his portfolio. We'll see what types of properties are working best for him. We'll see how much work he's doing on the rehab. We'll talk about his financing. We'll talk about how he's managing his properties and take a look at one of his deals and go over all the numbers. Joining us on the show today from Cleveland is Adam Craig. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Adam. We all know that hiring a property manager is expensive. Of course, you can always manage yourself, but after you have a few properties, you can pretty easily find yourself drowning in phone calls, bookkeeping, and other management tasks. I want to let you know about a better and cheaper way to manage your rental portfolio. It's with a virtual professional from BRRRR. They can handle repair requests, make sure your rent's collected, help you track expenses for tax time. They can even handle inquiries when you have a turnover. Pretty much anything you need they can do for you. And they'll do it all at a fraction of the cost of what a property manager charges. You also won't need to spend your time training your professional. BRRRR has employees that are trained and ready to hit the ground running for you. You can find out more at workergenx.com. That's worker, WORKERGENIX.com. workergenx.com. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property, and when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Adam, let's start off talking about the neighborhoods that you're investing in. What are the neighborhoods like?
So the neighborhoods I've kind of found my path in has been what I would say like C plus up to like B plus communities. And a lot of people ask me, well, what is that? And I would just try to think of, the best community around as an A and probably the worst as an F and kind of go from there. So it's typically, decent school districts, not super high crime, but at the same token, it's not going to be, your prime communities. I find the cash flow in those areas is significantly less because you pay a lot more for the house. And typically the risk is a lot lower. So you're taking on less risk in those communities, but you're expecting a lower return.
So how did you figure out that was the best neighborhood for you? Like, did you ever buy anything in maybe like an F neighborhood and figure out that wasn't for you? Or like, how did you stumble on this type of neighborhood?
It had to do with trial and error. I contacted my property manager who told me what areas to stay away from early on. And I kind of saw where they were suggesting to invest. And that's how I came up with that strategy. I was told, you could make some pretty good money in the real poor communities, but you're going to deal with a ton of headaches and good luck keeping your unit full or getting the rent that people perceive to get.
Okay. So you wanted something that was just going to be basically easy to manage.
Easier to manage, yeah.
Yeah.
And after running some numbers in the what I would say A communities, you realize that the increased price does not typically get offset by the increased rent. So you're going to bring in more in rent, but the house prices are so high, the cash flow is typically a lot lower.
And so you're doing the BRRRR strategy where you're buying properties, you're fixing them up. Have you ever bought anything that's rent ready, or have you always done the BRRRR strategy?
I've done some carpet and paint style houses where it was less than a few $1,000s to get them turned over, but that was early on. It might have been the first few properties. After maybe my third or fourth property, it was nothing but pretty substantial major rehabs.
Wow. Okay. So you're doing full gut rehabs on properties today.
More times than not, those are the ones we're going after. Yes.
All right. Let's walk through an actual property and kind of figure out what you're doing here. So for this property you have in mind, can you tell me about it?
It was a situation where it was a really good price, so I was able to get an offer on the table real quickly. Got the property for $55,000. We did about $35,000 into it, which consisted of a small kitchen, a couple bathrooms. Your basic no major renovations like driveways or anything like that.
How did you figure out what that was going to cost when you found that property? How did you do your budget? Like, how did you know what the kitchen was going to cost and the other things you were going to remodel? Like, how did you get that number?
So, by the time I got to this property, I could look at a kitchen and I had done so many that I would know, okay, this kitchen's going to cost me between $8,000 and $10,000. So I wouldn't have to get anyone out there for exact estimates. I had a pretty good range. Prior to all the experience I had, it was a situation where I was sitting down with a pen and paper and trying to come up with a really accurate budget. But after enough time, I knew if I picked up a house for $50,000, I knew the after repair value was $150,000. So you got $100,000 of wiggle room right there. So I wouldn't get too specific with my budget. I knew it was going to work out unless something really unforeseen would come up.
So you didn't have like a contractor walk the property with you to give you a bid. You just kind of ballpark things in your head.
That's essentially it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it took a while to get to that point.
Okay.
But yeah, that's what I do.
Now, how about getting the money to buy the property and to fix it up? So for buying the property, I imagine with the condition it was in when you bought it, you weren't able to get traditional financing. So how did you purchase the property?
So this particular property was purchased with hard money, which is what I did with most of my properties. But early on, I was self-funding these deals. I had an internet business that was somewhat lucrative, so I was able to self-fund them. But it didn't take too many deals to continuously run out of money. So after about 6 or 7 deals, I came across hard money, which I had a negative view on at the time. I didn't think paying 14 or 15% was ever something I was going to do. But after I started doing hard money, I went from doing 2 deals a year to 6 to 8 to 10, so wow. It accelerated things in a hurry. So it was all worth the interest if you're making money.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not keeping the hard money for long term. So even though the interest rate is high, it's just for a short period of time. How long do you generally hold the properties for to get through that rehab and to do your refi to your long-term financing?
Roughly 6 to 9 months on average.
All right. So for this property, were you in that same time frame that it took you 6 to 9 months?
This property was probably on the shorter side. It came with a already, put together kitchen where, a lot of times we rip out the kitchen because it's so far gone. I think this was a situation where we painted the cabinets and just refreshed everything around it. So we saved a lot of time on the kitchen and money, to be frank.
Are you doing any of the work yourself, or do you have contractors for everything?
Nope, I am not handy. Big learning curve when I first got going, since I didn't really know how to swing a hammer or how much things cost. But no, I don't do any of the work myself. Everything is subbed out.
Do you find that frustrating? Like I always find, I think so much of real estate is fun. I love finding deals. Even managing properties. I mean, I really love everything about rental properties, but dealing with contractors, I find can be incredibly frustrating. How about for you? Like, have you gotten lucky that you just found a great contractor, or have you had any struggle there?
Someday maybe I'll write a book on finding contractors because I've had a lot of experience. But I'd say since 2013, I've gone through maybe 60 or 70 contractors to get the maybe 10 that I have right now that are working continuously for me. So it's a big learning curve. I've learned a lot over time, but it took a long time to get there.
60 or 70. So what happened? Like, how did they, like, what kind of stuff happened to your contractors?
And more times than not, it's giving too much money up front, big down payments, and then these guys don't have enough money to finish the job, and then they disappear on you or they ask for more money. A lot of situations like that. So, these days, if I have a new relationship, I'm very apprehensive to give anything down, very small amount down these days for that exact reason.
How about for supplies? Like, because a lot of times they need money to buy the initial supplies. Will you give them any money for that, or do you just expect that they're going to have to fund that?
So with supply, I always like to know early on, contractors took so much advantage of quotes because they would give you a number for labor and material. And at the time, I didn't know how much material cost. So I think there was a situation where I had something replaced. What was it? Okay, so I had just a dishwasher that needed installed at a rental property, and I called a big name appliance installation company that charged me $375. After I talked to the tenant, he told me he was there for 45 minutes. And then I said, why am I not, better investigating how much things cost, how long things should take? So I am now at the point where I have a company credit card. I give it to the contractor. They buy their materials on the card, and then I'm getting charged just for labor. So I know exactly what my labor costs are.
Okay. That's good. And so you've kind of weeded through all the bad contractors, and the contractors you're working with now, are they all pretty good? Or are you still having problems?
I would say for the most part, they're all pretty good.
Awesome.
But keep in mind, these aren't the kind of contractors that are going to get a job in the union and go work on a skyscraper downtown. You have to work in a budget in this capacity. And with that comes some budget contractors. And all these guys have headaches.
Sure.
You can call a big name contractor in town, but you're going to get charged out the nose, and your returns are going to be very small.
Right. Okay. All right. So you bought the property at 55. You put 35 into it. So you're all in at 90,000. Now, when you did your refinance to long-term financing, what was your mortgage payment?
Mortgage payment was about $780 a month with, taxes, insurance, and the mortgage. And that typically gets bumped up because taxes do go up after, they reassess the new value. But it was $780 a month, and I want to say it's $860 right now.
Okay. And then what do you have that property rented for?
When I did this in 2018, I rented it for $1,300. It's currently leased at $1,600. So, we went from $600 a month cash flow, now we're approaching $1,000 a month in cash flow.
Wow. That's pretty good. All right. So you've got $820 before any other expenses. So your mortgage is $780. The other thing you're going to have is some vacancies, some taxes, some vacancies, some repairs here and there. How do you budget for that?
I usually factor in, based on experience, about 5% of my gross rents into vacancy and repairs. It goes up or down depending on the property, but I find that if I, budget for roughly this for each property every year, I stay pretty close. These days, we have enough rental income coming in from 80 plus tenants that we don't have to set money aside for repairs. It is there, but at least I know that 5% figure is fairly accurate.
Okay, so you're not actually putting money aside. Whatever comes up on a monthly basis, you just deal with it.
Yeah. We have, when you have a few properties, it's definitely more important. But after you get enough of them, they can kind of offset each other.
Awesome. So now, what are you doing with that cash flow? Do you live on your cash flow, or do you have a day job?
So I have a internet business that I started right out of college that I still do. That particular business did really well, and it still does fairly well, but it's not my primary focus anymore. So I don't have a day job per se. I'm an entrepreneur, business owner on both sides, but real estate is now pretty much my bread and butter. I get most of my income through real estate.
Okay, awesome. So that's good. I mean, I think that's a smart way to do it. So you've got your rental income that is there for you and paying your bills, but then you've also got some extra money coming in from your internet business too.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That internet business had its heyday in about 2016, but it's still, really successful business.
That's awesome. And are you self-managing? You mentioned you had a property manager. Was that just at the beginning, or what are you doing now for management?
Yeah, the property manager was at the beginning because that internet business was taking up 90% of my time. And, you fast forward 10 years, I'm spending 90% of my time on real estate. So after 4 or 5 years, I ended up ditching the property manager because just very unsatisfied with a lot of things. And then we manage everything in house, and it's so much better.
Why were you unsatisfied?
Oh, where do I start? Property managers, as I learned over the years, they have misaligned incentives. For instance, late fees in most relationships with property managers go to the property manager. So they don't have much incentive to have the tenant pay on time. Another one is they don't have incentive to maximize your monthly rent. A property manager does not want to go out to a property and show it 25 times at your inflated price. They would rather have you drop that price to a very marketable rate, show it once, and be done. The commission a property manager receives on a $1,500 a month rent or a $1,400 a month is negligible. So they're not going to really care to get you that extra $100. After I took over, I bumped up rents. I was leasing them quick, and then I realized the property manager was not at all trying to maximize rents.
Those are all such good points. Like those are things that drive me crazy. Yeah, every last one of them, especially the late fees. I don't understand why property managers keep the late fees. Like you're the owner, you're the one that's getting paid late. I feel like the owner should at least get part of that.
Completely agree. And then that's one misaligned incentive. Another one would be they typically take the first month's rent. Half of it goes to the broker. Sometimes half of it goes to the manager. But so they have more incentive to turn your property over than have a tenant stay there long term. So a lot of misaligned incentives.
Now, what about the extra work? Like say for doing showings, when you have as many properties as you do you spend a lot of your time doing showings?
So we did, and it was less than a year of self-managing where I decided to do self-showings. Part of it was out of laziness, but it got to the point where, we came up with a pretty good system. And now, we have nothing but self-showings. The tenant contacts us. We give them some information on the property. They let us know when they're ready to go. We provide access instructions, and that's been it. It's pretty rare where we actually physically go to a showing these days.
Do you just have a lockbox and give them the code to get in?
Yep, that's exactly what we do.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll ask them to follow up with us. We've had situations where we've asked them to send us pictures of their ID, but for the most part, it's just go and show.
Are you ever afraid that they're going to go in there when they're not supposed to? Maybe they're going to come back or do something to the property?
It's crossed my mind. And when I tell people I do this, that's the first thing that comes up. But for me, time is money. And I've saved, countless hours, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours not doing showings. So if the worst thing that happens is someone takes an appliance, does a little damage, which is very unlikely to happen in the first place, then so be it. But it's been, it just opened up so much time to be able to do other things.
If they're going to steal your refrigerator, they're going to steal your refrigerator, whether they have the lockbox code or not. So I think it's maybe a false sense of security to think that you're not going to get broken into if you're doing showings yourself.
I agree. And it puts them in actually a more scrutinizing situation if they call you first before the showing and then it winds up missing after it. So they're kind of, it would be a pretty risky proposition for someone to be that bold. Not to say it couldn't happen, but so far in, 7 years of doing self showings, we haven't had any issues.
Yeah. And how about for the management? Is it a lot of work or a lot of phone calls to manage the properties?
After tenants are in place, it's typically real smooth sailing. We have property management systems that they do everything from screening to background checks to leasing to accepting rent. So we don't have to send out any late notices. It's all automated.
How about evictions? Do you have many evictions?
Knock on wood. Only 2 evictions since 2013 when I've been doing this. Yeah, so
that's
we do
really
everything
good.
we can to avoid evictions.
I mean, with as many properties as you have over 10 years, I mean, that's probably hundreds of tenants, and to only have 2 evictions, that's really pretty remarkable. So what's your screening criteria?
So our screening criteria is similar to what a lot of property managers in the area, we typically look for 2.5 to 3 times rent in income. But what I have found out is doing the BRRRR strategy, we have these beautiful homes that command top rent. So we're able to get a lot of applicants and be pretty selective. Most of these people are young professionals, and they can afford $1,600 or $1,700. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot in most parts of the country, but here in the Cleveland market, that's top rent for a single family home, unless you're downtown or something. So those types of tenants come with typically more reliability.
It seems to me there's 3 keys to Adam's success. The first one is that he's buying properties in a good area. He's doing a pretty extensive rehab to the property and making them really nice, and that's helping him attract good tenants. And then the third one is he's doing a really good job of screening his tenants. So I think all 3 of those things collectively is how Adam has been so successful with this. If anybody wants to follow Adam, I've got a link to his Instagram on my website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 442. I'd like to thank Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group for sponsoring today's episode. If you're looking to buy a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, make sure you reach out to Chaley. She's a nationwide lender, and she can help you find the right financing for your rental property. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she just rolled out a brand new second position HELOC. So if you have equity in a rental property, that's a great way to tap into it to continue to grow your portfolio. If you want to learn more, or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, you can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you follow the show. I put out new episodes every single Tuesday, and if you're following the show, you'll get notified as soon as every episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.